without further ado, we want to welcome Sandy to the stage for our first Eagle talk.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to hear about our eagles, and thank you for enjoying them as much as we do. So I will just start with a little bit of history of our bald eagles. We used to have in Big Bear Valley just wintering bald eagles. They would come from Montana, Idaho, and Canada for the most part. The Forest Service did a study with trackers, and they traced them, and that's where most of them were going. And they only did it for like 2 years because then the trackers fell off as they were supposed to do. But they got good information about that. And we were having, 20 to 30 years ago, we were having an average of 25 to 30 bald eagles wintering in the valley. And then every March to April, they would head home to do their nesting up there. But in 2009, a bald eagle stayed and was spotted all summer. And that one had a tag on it. Not one of the trackers from before, but the tag showed that it had come from Catalina, and the Catalina Islands. And so they knew that it was hatched there. And then that one started staying year-round and took up a mate and started nesting here. And the Forest Service didn't realize it was nesting here until 1 year. Every year they have the third graders go, they take them around on a tour around the lake to spot bald eagles everywhere. So the third graders know how to look for bald eagles, and they catch the wintering ones usually. But this 1 year in 2012, one of the little third graders looking through the scope said, "There's a baby." And the biologist that was with them thought, "Oh no, that can't be." But they had been building this nest that they often do even in the winter because that's one of their bonding rituals. And so sure enough, he looked and there was a baby. And that baby grew up to be named Jack by the Forest Service after someone who had been to every Forest Service bald eagle count for the whole, I think by then it was almost 20 years that it'd been running, and had just passed away, so they named it Jack. But by the time that eagle fledged, it was practicing. You know how if you've been watching, you see how the winger sizing, how the eagles bounce up and down on the nest. And this was a nest on the top of a snag, and that nest had almost nothing left by the time that eagle fledged. and when the parents would come in, that eagle was much bigger than both of them, so it became named Jackie. And we could see, we knew that only the mating pair that was named Ricky and Lucy, Jackie's parents, were here all year round, and those were the only eagles that were here all year. Except after Jackie was hatched, there was always one that was the right age to be Jackie. She's not tagged, so we don't know for sure, but every year there was one that stayed all year, all summer, that was always the right age to be Jackie. And then when the parents, in 2015, we put up, here's some of their other, Ricky and Lucy, and they had another chick 2 years later, and then they had 2 chicks in 2015-16, and that you'll see is in a different tree. We didn't realize when we put up the eagle nest camera that they had moved their nest already, and so we spent one season with literally an empty nest. And but that's the eagle nest, and we put it up in October 2015, and you can see how big the nest is up there, that a human being fits in it with no problem. And then in that next season, Jackie came, and she still had black markings on her head, is how so we were could tell the age. The first 5 years, you can tell the age of an eagle by their feather markings. They don't get the full white head and tail until they're 5 years old, and that means they're sexually mature. And so Jackie was not quite, but she got a mate and took over that nest that her parents had moved out of. And there was lots of snuggling. Actually, they even made it on camera for us. But no chicks. And so we think Jackie might have been too young that year. The next year, however, Jackie and Mr. B, her mate, had Stormy and BBB for Big Bear Baby. And sadly, Big Bear Baby didn't quite make it through a storm. When they are less than 6 weeks old, they don't have all of their waterproof feathers, and they just have down. But at the same time, they're growing, and they were too big for both of them to fit under Jackie. And so BBB got kind of wet in the snowy rain and didn't make it. It was just too hard. But Stormy did fledge and is out there somewhere. You can see how big bald eagles are. People don't seem to realize, looking through the camera, they look like, these birds that are pretty good size, but actually if you put out your arms, that's your wingspan, and it's the same as your height. A female bald eagle has an 8-foot wingspan, so as if she was 8 feet tall. And the male is about 6 feet, a little over, but the male is significantly smaller. And just, I'll step away from the mic for just a minute, if you can hear me. If I was holding a bald eagle like this, then it would come from here to here. Oh, wow. Just the body. Just to give you an idea of how big they are. So from my nose to my knees. And then in the fall of 2018, the new guy showed up. We installed a new camera, and Shadow showed up. And maybe he's a camera ham, I don't know. But we could tell his age again because he had black markings on him, so he was just about 5 years old. The nest was still occupied at that point by Stormy, the previous chick. He was coming back and forth to the nest, and by Mr. B, Jackie's first mate. And Shadow, when Shadow was in the nest, they would come in and they would try to chase him away. All three of them. Jackie did, Mr. B did, Stormy did. They all tried to chase him away, and he would not budge. He just said, nope, I'm staying. And at one point, I even saw Mr. B come in, and he kept trying to poke at Shadow, and Shadow would just lean back out of the way and stand right back up like one of those punching dummies. And Mr. B finally just gave up, and that was the last time I saw him in the nest. So Shadow won by just standing his ground. And so Jackie said, okay, I take you. And then we got the nesting season underway for the next year. That one of the big bonding things, like I mentioned, is the eagles bring sticks. They build the nest. And we are sure that Jackie has some kind of special stick store at the bottom of the tree, because she comes in with the most amazing, complex, and sometimes huge trees that she brings up, and it's hard to imagine that she can get them up there. The nest, by the way, is 150 feet in the air in a Jeffrey pine tree. So to get that camera up there, we have to hire special people that have both a federal and a state permit, as well as know how to climb these trees without doing any damage to the biology of the tree. And they are very protective of their nests during nesting season. So you can see here they're chasing off what's probably ravens. That's their most annoying competitor up there. And then we had the first egg. And usually they were laying eggs in January, but that year it wasn't until March that we had eggs. It was a little bit colder than most seasons, so they just kind of held off, I think. But we got the first egg of the season, and you can see Shadow looking at it there, and that is the first time that he has seen an egg, because he's just sexually mature. There's no other eagle would have allowed him into the nest. So since he hatched, he hasn't seen an egg. And so he was a little astonished. But he learned how to sit on the eggs, and when Jackie would come back, he would not get up, and he would say, "Nope, my turn. I'm not done. Sorry." And she would have to bite him on the beak to get him off. That's still happening, if you saw this season. But anytime there's a storm or at night, Jackie, because she's bigger especially, she's the one that feels like she can protect the eggs the best. So she will stay on the eggs always when there is a storm, always when there's bad weather. And the only time I've seen her let the male stay on the nest at night is one time she had been there for 27 hours through a snowstorm, and Mr. B came, and she said, "Okay, you can have it." and then another time when the eggs weren't hatching, she had given up, but Shadow would not give up, and so she let him stay the night on the nest. But you can see they get completely covered by snow, but her feathers are waterproof, so it's it's like she has a big down comforter and jacket on, so she's okay with all that snow. And Shadow brings fish, lots of fish, often fish we've discovered without the head, so we think fish head is his favorite meal. But he brings them and feeds Jackie. She also feeds herself, but because they take turns sitting on the nest. And Jackie almost never brings fish back just for Shadow. She will for the chick, but Shadow brings fish for Jackie. That is part of the ritual. And whenever, if you've listened to on the camera, whenever there is a fish on the way, you can tell because she's shouting at the top of her lungs, "Mine, mine, 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 mine." And everybody knows that whatever is coming, food into the nest, is Jackie's, and you better get out of the way. And then we had Simba and Cookie that hatched. That was Shadow's first kids. And yes, they grew into adorable little bundles of fluff. And Shadow learned how to feed them. And it was obvious at first that he didn't know. He had never fed chicks before. So he would stand behind Jackie and look over the edge and watch what she was doing with the chicks and breaking off little pieces. And then he'd try it, and he'd kind of look around to see if he had done it all right. But he got it down really well. So that was 2019 with Simba and Cookie. Simba did fledge, but Cookie did not make it again through a storm. But that's the average for bald eagles, is about 50% make it to fledging. And then only about 50% of those make it to the first year. So they have a rough time out there. And that's Simba after he had fledged. And that's the snag tree that Jackie was actually hatched in, where that nest kind of crashed down because she was so big. And it's about 50 feet from the nest tree. But this season, that snag tree blew down. It had gotten too old and blew down in a windstorm. And then we had the 2019 and 20 season with all the bringing sticks again. And sitting on the nest in about November. When they've been bringing sticks, they start in about October, and they've been bringing sticks. Jackie will start trying out the nest bowl to see how it fits, to see if it's working well. Or sometimes she'll move a stick out from under her to get it just right. And then the eggs were laid that year in January. And they lay eggs about 3 days apart because if there is not enough food or something like that, it gives the second one a better chance. But if there is plenty of food, they will do what's called delayed incubation. So the first egg they don't sit on full time. They will sit on enough to keep it warm, but not, ready for incubation until the second egg is laid. And that way the chicks will hatch closer together, which gives the second chick a better chance of survival. Because if the first one is too much older, they practice sibling aside, which, the older one will kind of push the younger one out. So if they're closer together, that's much less likely to happen. And if there's plenty of food, that's what happens. So, and this is Shadow's comment about there being a second egg suddenly that he didn't know anything about. And you can see at the bottom Jackie doing a wing slap. And that is how she protects the nest. Any noise, anything around, they get a wing slap to be chased away immediately if there's eggs or chicks in the nest. And she did that mostly at night. There's a little pair of flying squirrels, Fiona and Freddie, that come at night and are always shocked every fall because they've been in and out of the nest all summer when there's no eagles there, and suddenly there's this giant bird. And so they dash away, but not before Jackie's wing slapped, because every little noise. And again, she sat through lots of snowstorms. And this time the tree was even got blown enough that the camera moved a little bit and everything was sideways just because there was so much snow on it from the tree sitting a little off kilter. And those eggs, there must have been something wrong because Jackie and Shadow did not sit on them full time and finally just left long enough that the ravens got them. So every other time they've had eggs, they sit on them immediately. They sit on them constantly. So they had to know something that we couldn't tell. So, and sadly, a lot of people say that animals don't have emotion, but you can't convince me of that after watching Shadow when those eggs didn't hatch. He was definitely depressed for a couple weeks. But he got right back into his, tormenting Jackie and biting her tail feathers and her wing feathers. Whoops. And this is one of their night roosts, and it's close enough to the nest tree that we can pan the camera around and see it when they're there in the evening. And when it's when it's nesting season and there's eggs or chicks, then Jackie is on the nest at night, and Shadow is probably in this tree nearby. But when in the summer, when there aren't chicks to guard, then they spend the night together. And they have more than one nest tree. They're not always in this one. Then 2020 and 21 begins, again with the little kissy beaky and pokey and lots of bringing more sticks. And Shadow always keeps a good eye on Jackie when they start sitting. He's checking to see if there's any egg under there yet. And you can actually, when she stands up, you can actually see him. He'll go sideways around to see if there's an egg yet. But they kept, again, bringing sticks, and there's, Shadow biting Jackie's wing, as he often does. The first egg was laid in January 6th and the second January 9th, again, the 3 days apart. And there's Shadow checking on that there's an egg there. And as soon as there is an egg, they start bringing fluff, softer material to the nest to keep the egg warm, to have a softer place for the chicks to set. And so they start bringing fluff right away. And then Jackie, you can see at the bottom, is laying a second egg. And there it is. After those first eggs didn't hatch, that last year they had a second clutch of eggs, which is not, doesn't always happen. It's fairly rare, but they did have a second clutch of eggs in the same year. Sadly, they sat on those eggs through all the snow and everything like usual. And the first egg even started to hatch, but it didn't finish hatching, so. And Shadow again didn't want to give up. But Fiona took advantage and thought she had hit the jackpot because this giant egg was there and none of those big giant eagles were there to guard it. And she tried for probably 10 minutes to get that egg out of the nest, but she could not pick it up. It was as big as her. But we're back to building again. And you can see how much they've been building. If you see the upper left, that there's a Y in the branches of the tree, and it keeps getting, lower and lower as the nest rises up to it. And you can see in the lower right, we can't even see the Y in those limbs. So the nest, it's about 6 feet across now, and it's now 5 feet deep in sticks. And the biggest eagle nest that they've had on record actually fell down because it was more than 2 tons of sticks. And so hopefully that won't happen here. But we did have to raise the camera last year because they were covering the camera lens with sticks. And we put up a new camera last year, and this is how they have to go up the tree with ropes so they don't do any damage. And the camera lasts between 3 and 4 years, and it was close to that, and we didn't want it to go out during the nesting season, so we replaced it with a new one. And again, you can see how big the nest is compared to a human. And it's, the nest itself is 145 feet up. We measured it this time. And that's Nate waving for the camera, but Nate is 6 feet tall, so you can see how big that nest is. But we have some other animals that show up and we get to spy on. On the upper right, you can see Fiona or Freddie. It's probably Fiona. And we have gray squirrels and stellar jays, and these stellar jays are hilarious. When we were, every time we've been there putting up the cameras, there's usually a stellar jay there that has learned how to imitate bald eagles. And even the biologists, when this stellar jay starts doing its call, it'll be in a tree right next to us, and it'll start doing its call, and everybody turns around thinking there's an eagle right there next to us, and it's that stellar jay that has the call down perfectly. I'm pretty sure they've contracted with them to guard their nest. And on the right is the white-headed woodpecker and a chipmunk in the middle. But we got to see acorn woodpeckers nest in that snag tree last summer, and their little ones fledged, and we got to see them going in the hole and coming out and bringing food, and the little one sticking its head out. And just so you know, it has an infrared light on it, but that light is not visible to the eagles themselves, so they don't know the light is there, and it's also not visible to humans, so you don't see it. It's only the camera lens that sees that light that allows us to see the nest. And here they are building again and getting ready once again with adding more sticks. And because we put up a new camera and the old one was still working, we actually put the second one up a little ways away from the nest, so we have a second view and you can see the eagles flying in and out, or some of their wild chases of hawks and ravens and things like that. We've even caught Shadow on camera turning upside down, on his attack mode on some of these birds. And doing their bonding that Jackie and Shadow seem to be so good at. This year, the first egg was on January 22nd, and the second one, January 25th. And Shadow attending to his mate there, as he always does. And you can see here, we finally got a pip. And that's the little bump when the chick is trying to get out of the egg. And even though they say that eagles never help the chicks get out, we caught Shadow a few times breaking off pieces of the eggshell to help maybe a little bit. And then there's a chick at the bottom. It made it out. And there they are, checking them out. And that's actually Shadow feeding. He's gotten the feeding down really well. And to me, the little one, they look like little spacemen when they first are hatched with their big black eyes. And they grow very quickly. And so that is Spirit before 6 weeks old, because there's not the waterproof feathers. And you can see getting bigger and bigger. Yeah. And no matter how big, Spirit still likes to have mommy and daddy feed. And we have determined, because of some indicators, that we think Spirit is a girl. Because she is bigger than Dad, which means very highly likely it's a girl. But we also have one of our chat moderators has a special program that can measure the frequency in hertz of the vocals. And with that, we thought for sure it was a boy at the beginning. They were about the same as Simba's had been, but they kept getting lower and lower, and then they'd go up a little bit, and the males are higher frequency than the females, and so he was trying to fool us, or she was trying to fool us, but they've dropped down to the female frequency, and they haven't gone back up. So, and with the size, you can see that that's Spirit next to Shadow, and definitely bigger. Yeah, she hasn't filled out her full body mass yet, but the height, the skeleton is as big as she's going to get. And that gives you an idea of how fast they grow. Just in 57 days, we've gone from a tiny little hatchling to a full-grown eagle. And we think Spirit likes to have fun with Mom and Dad. None of the other chicks have done this, but when chicks poop, they poop out of the nest. And so they learn to back up toward the edge of the nest and shoot it up in the air. Spirit has 4 times hit Jackie, direct hit. And she got Shadow the other day for the first time. And so we have various theories. One is she had to make Mom and Dad match, so they had, because it's the same wing. Another one is there's been some younger eagles flying around the area, so she may be marking her territory. My Mom and Dad, you can't have them. But I could swear that right after she did this, what happened next was she was doing a victory dance in the nest, flapping her wings, and so, yeah. But she still likes to be fed by mom and dad. And this is her when she first started, really spreading her wings out. She's getting ready for her first flight. But look at those wings now. And yeah. So you can see how big her wingspan is. And she's quite curious. So she turns around upside down even to look at things and to see what's going on around her. And she's very observant of everything. And again, still liking mom and dad to feed her. And I like when all three of them are hanging out in the nest and just kind of there as a family. And the other 2 nights ago, for the first time, Spirit stood up like a big girl all night, because eagles prefer standing when they're sleeping, and their talons lock onto the branches. And so they don't fall off or anything. But they prefer sleeping on the branch. That's why Jackie started sleeping on the front porch, we call it, the front limb, when when Spirit got big enough that she didn't need Jackie to sit on her. So, but now Spirit is showing that she knows how to sleep like a big girl. And so there she is, getting ready, flapping and practicing and getting ready to fly soon. And we have our website, and we have lots of merchandise and things on there if you're interested in Jackie and Shadow. But we also have 2 Facebook pages if you like getting the stories about the eagles as well as just watching the camera. And one is we post stories on there and educational information, and then the other one is interactive. And you can join that and, post your own pictures and comment back and forth. And so we like being able to see this nest and learn the eagle's life. We like that everybody is paying attention and learning what it's like in nature, that it's not just something out there distant, it's something that we can watch and learn about.
One more round of applause for Sandy. We really appreciate you being here. And we look forward to seeing you guys again. We're, like I said, May through October, we're having events. We'd love for you to join us again. So have a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you again soon.